The lavish Aurelia restaurant was packed. The main door opened. A young woman stumbled in, immediately swaying. She gripped a table edge, her face pale, her lips trembling. I can't walk. A patron frowned. What kind of scene is this? A wealthy woman declared, if you can't stand, you shouldn't be here. The girl burst into tears. Everyone recoiled. Daniel Ross, a 37-year-old single dad, guided his daughter, Nora 7, toward their table. Nora tugged his sleeve. Daddy, she's hurting. Daniel looked at the girl, utterly alone. He walked over. She whispered, I can't move. Daniel scooped her up and carried her through the shocked, silent restaurant. Daniel Ross was a single father, a man whose life revolved around maintenance work and delivery driving. His income was modest, but his integrity was his most valuable asset. He had lost his wife to a relentless illness years ago, leaving him Nora, his anchor, his only reason for striving. Daniel had spent years volunteering at a local burn and recovery unit while caring for his wife, so he instantly recognized the telltale gait of someone recovering from intense, recent surgery. It was a movement pattern of extreme, suppressed agony. Today was meant to be a celebration. Nora had earned top marks in school, and Daniel wanted to treat her to a meal at a restaurant slightly beyond their budget, a rare, deserved indulgence. But as they entered the refined atmosphere of Aurelia, the quiet joy was immediately shattered by the sight of the young woman, Aria, around 24, staggering near the entrance. Her face was contorted in pain, and she was clearly trying to find a staff member, any staff member, for help. She tried weakly to ask for a chair, but the restaurant staff avoided her gaze, their expressions a mix of condescension and annoyance. They saw a liability, not a customer. A man at a nearby bar, impeccably dressed, scoffed loudly enough for everyone to hear. This establishment is for people who can walk to their table, not for a liability that needs carrying. Aria flinched, retreating a step, her hands shaking violently. I don't want to bother anyone. Nora, her eyes wide with compassion, squeezed Daniel's hand. Daddy, she looks like the people we saw at the hospital that time. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. He understood. In places of privilege and wealth, the weak were often the ones who endured the most casual cruelty. The world loved strength. It despised vulnerability. Aria's attempt to retreat failed. She stumbled against an empty service cart and sank down onto a velvet-upholstered bench near the wall, tears streaming down her face. The pain was too much. The whispers began immediately, sharp and merciless. She's looking for attention. Just another ploy for sympathy or a handout. To weep in a place this elegant? She has no class. Daniel let go of Nora's hand and started walking, not toward their table, but toward Aria. He didn't need to discuss it. He simply acted. Aria looked up, her breathing shallow and broken. I just had surgery. My legs hurt so badly. I can't move them. Daniel didn't press for details. He didn't need to know the why, only the what. He knelt, carefully slipped one hand behind her back and the other beneath her knees. He lifted her slowly, smoothly, as one would lift a delicate, injured child. The entire dining room went silent. Spoons stopped halfway to mouths. Eyes, previously dismissive, now stared in open disbelief. What is that man doing? Someone gasped. Daniel ignored them all. He carried Aria, steady and unhurried. As he passed the central dining area, he paused, his eyes sweeping over the frozen, judgmental faces. No person here deserves to be left abandoned on the floor, he stated, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. He held the young woman tightly, focusing only on her shallow breasts. As he cradled her against his chest, Daniel felt the distinct, alarming heat radiating through her thin dress. Her post-operative wounds were clearly not healing well. Infection. Daniel's protective, silent act of carrying Aria revealed his inherent integrity, while the alarming heat of her legs signaled a dangerous physical crisis hidden beneath her emotional pain. Daniel gently carried Aria to a discreet, comfortable booth near the back, supporting her as he slid her onto the cushioned seat against the wall. He signaled for a server, asking for a warm towel and water immediately. But the server, having just witnessed the scene, shook his head dismissively. Sir, please stop disrupting the other guests. We cannot cater to this kind of drama. She is in pain, Daniel insisted calmly. She needs basic first aid. A woman at an adjacent glittering table, heavy with diamonds, snorted a laugh. Everyone's in pain, young man, but no one puts on a performance like hers for attention. Arya attempted to speak, her voice a frail whisper against the ambient noise. I'm not performing. A young man across the room, already filming the entire incident on his phone, smirked. This is gold. Let me post this to TikTok. It'll go completely viral. Daniel, his expression darkening instantly, stepped directly in front of Arya, shielding her from the phone lens. Turn that off now. His voice was low, yet it cut through the room's chatter. It wasn't a request, it was an order. No one has the right to film a person in distress. The young man, initially defiant, met Daniel's steady, cold gaze. Daniel's eyes held the quiet, dangerous resolve of a man who had faced true loss. The cameraman faltered, lowering his phone slightly, but the situation was escalating rapidly. Arya began to tremble violently. Her breathing became ragged and shallow. She clenched her hands into fists, pressing them hard into her thighs to suppress a scream of pain. Daniel recognized the signs immediately, not just of pain, but of a systemic reaction. He gently took her hand. How long ago was your surgery? 3 days, she managed to gasp, closing her eyes tightly against a surge of agony. 3 days ago. Wakum. An older gentleman nearby chuckled cruelly. Just 3 days? She's faking it. Who gets major surgery and goes straight to a fancy restaurant? The story doesn't add up. Arya's composure shattered. Her hidden fear spilled out with her tears. I have no one. I just wanted one last hot meal. I don't want to be home alone anymore. The surrounding diners leaned in, their expressions morphing from judgment to thinly veiled disgust. They scrutinized her from the waist up, her expensive dress, her perfect hair, but completely ignored the genuine agony radiating from her lower body. The coldness was palpable. Daniel stood up fully, his quiet strength commanding attention. This young lady needs help. What you people need is humanity. Suddenly, the restaurant manager, a tall man in a tailored suit, strode over, his face etched with panic over the potential damage to their reputation. Sir, if she continues to disturb our clientele, I will be forced to ask all 3 of you to leave. Nora, Daniel's daughter, instinctively stepped in front of her father, her small body forming a defense line. Don't kick her out. She didn't do anything wrong. The guests erupted in loud, aggressive murmurs. What a nuisance. People like that don't belong in a place like this. The humiliation was complete. Arya was paralyzed not by her legs, but by the overwhelming public scorn. As the manager prepared to deliver the final threat, a gray-haired server, who had been quietly watching the exchange from a distance, suddenly turned pale. He whispered frantically to the manager, his eyes fixed on Arya's face. My God, do you know who that is? We are in serious trouble. The public humiliation reaches its climax, but a single terrified server recognizes the girl's face, signaling a powerful reversal of power about to occur. The manager, confused by the older server's terror, quickly pulled out his reservation list, scrolling through the names of their most elite private clients. His eyes widened, then went completely blank. It can't be. She is Arya Hartman. A ripple of stunned silence spread through the dining room, immediately followed by an explosion of panicked whispers. Hartman? As in the Hartman medical conglomerate? A woman gasped, clutching her designer purse. She is the only daughter of the billionaire CEO, Mr. Julian Hartman? Daniel looked down at Arya, who nodded weakly, tears still glistening on her cheeks. She seemed terrified that her identity had been discovered. Arya's voice was barely audible. Please don't tell them. They'll treat me differently. Daniel placed his hand firmly on her shoulder, his gesture protective and reassuring. You are you, Arya. They don't change you. Don't be afraid. The restaurant was now absolutely silent. The faces that moments ago were contorted with disgust now shifted into masks of abject horror and sickening repentance. The rich woman with the diamonds rushed over. Ms. Hartman, we had no idea. I am so incredibly sorry. She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a wad of cash. Please, let me pay for your meal. Anything you want. The man who had laughed at her story stammered, pulling out a menu. What would you like to eat, young lady? I'll pay for everything. He looked physically ill, suddenly realizing the severity of his judgment on the daughter of a titan. Daniel stood up, his body a solid barrier between Arya and the crowd's sudden, false goodwill. His voice cut through the air, colder than ice, forcing the shame deeper. If she wasn't the daughter of a billionaire, Daniel challenged, his gaze sweeping across their faces, would you have offered a single kind word? Would you have picked up her menu or simply watched her fall? No one answered. The silence was their confession, a suffocating blanket of self-reproach. The manager, pale and sweating, backed away, ordering the staff to prepare an empty private room for Arya immediately, promising the best care and discretion. But the gestures were too late and too transactional. Twist 2, the real agony. As Daniel finished speaking, a thick, official envelope slipped unnoticed from Arya's jacket pocket and fell to the floor. Daniel bent down to retrieve it, glancing at the official letterhead of a specialist clinic. He read the first line and froze, the knowledge hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Failed 7th spinal cord surgery. Arya Hartman must be moved to the marrow tissue transplant waiting list. He looked down at her legs, the blood stains slightly darker on the clean white compression bandage. This wasn't a routine recovery. It was her 7th last-ditch effort that had failed catastrophically, leaving her vulnerable to the kind of septic infection he now suspected. She hadn't been faking. She had been fighting for her life alone, the sheer failure of the operation more crushing than the pain. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. Arya, you have an infection. You are facing a life-saving transplant. Why are you out here alone 3 days post-op? Arya's silent tears turned into wrenching sobs. I couldn't stay home anymore. The doctors, the nurses, they look at me like a failed experiment. And my father's partners, they only see the Hartman air that keeps breaking. Everyone whispers about how I'm damaged goods, how the CEO's daughter is unreliable because of a chronic condition. I didn't want to be a burden anymore. I wanted one normal, public moment before I faced the final failure. Her last words were choked, raw, revealing the immense emotional pressure of living up to a dynasty's flawless expectation while her body betrayed her. Daniel sat down next to her, his voice rough with shared grief and empathy. He gently rubbed her back. Failure is a scientific outcome, Arya. It is not who you are. No one is a burden when they are still fighting. The collective mood of the restaurant shifted completely. Guests began to weep openly, tears of shame, realization, and shared sorrow. The woman from a nearby table, the physical rehabilitation doctor who had remained silent, stepped forward. I am Dr. Evelyn Shaw. I must examine her immediately. Daniel cooperated instantly, his movements precise and professional. He gently lifted Arya's leg to the correct, stabilized angle, supporting the weight from her hip. He instructed Dr. Shaw precisely on where to check for pressure abnormalities, indicating his familiarity with complex orthopedic trauma. He checked her pressure points and monitored her pain response, calling out a specific nerve response he needed Dr. Shaw to verify. Dr. Shaw was astonished by his technical vocabulary and seamless coordination. Sir, you are clearly trained. That specific maneuver for avoiding sciatic nerve impingement is highly specialized. Are you a retired physician or perhaps a specialized physical therapist? Daniel looked away, unable to lie, but unwilling to boast. I studied medicine once. I worked in surgical recovery. Nora, sensing his sadness, placed her small hand on his arm. My daddy used to help my mommy before she went to heaven, and he knew how to make the scary pain go away. The simple, innocent truth crushed the remaining resistance in the room. They realized the man who had shown them humanity was a deeply wounded expert who had sacrificed his career to care for his own loved one, and whose kind act today stemmed from a deep, personal vow. Mild cellulitis, progressing to systemic infection if not managed, Daniel stated. his professional diagnosis crisp and alarming. She absolutely must not bear weight. We need systemic antibiotics and monitoring immediately. Dr. Shaw nodded grimly. Your assessment is exactly correct. If you hadn't intervened, she likely would have collapsed from septic shock right here. You saved her life, Mr. Ross. The dining room fell into a heavy collective silence of regret. Arya gripped Daniel's hand fiercely, her eyes shining with true gratitude. Thank you, Daniel, because you looked at me like a person, not like a patient, and not like a prize. You saw the human beneath the heiress. The dual discovery of Arya's dire, failed transplant attempts and Daniel's identity as a former surgical recovery specialist solidifies their shared profound wound, deepening their bond from gratitude to mutual recognition. The Hartman Corporation's private silent ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Its crew, professional and efficient, moved with discreet haste. Daniel lifted Arya once more, his steps measured and steady, his movements economical to ensure her minimal discomfort. He placed her gently onto the gurney. Arya clung to his neck, her hands clutching his uniform, a pure, desperate act of dependence on the one person who hadn't abandoned her. It was the first time she had felt genuinely safe since the surgery. Nora, her presence a quiet balm, walked beside the gurney. She didn't talk about princesses or heroes. She simply held Arya's hand and patted it gently. Don't be scared, Arya. We'll sit with you. You're not alone anymore. In the quiet, climate-controlled ambulance, the paramedics were grateful for Daniel's presence. He continued to manage Arya's pain, verbally guiding the crew on positioning and confirming the fluid rates for the IV drip. He worked in perfect sync with the medical team, demonstrating a level of expertise far beyond a layman. Arya looked at him as the city lights blurred past the window. You should have been a doctor, Daniel. Why did you leave that life? You were brilliant just now. Daniel sighed, running a hand over his face. It's simple, Arya. I loved healing, but I couldn't handle loss. When I was saving other people's lives, I felt like I was betraying my wife, Clara, because I couldn't save hers. After she passed, every success in the hospital felt like a crushing failure to me personally. I couldn't face the weight of that responsibility again. He paused. The maintenance job, it was simple. The stakes were low. Fixing a broken lock doesn't break your heart. Arya squeezed his hand. But you risked your quiet, simple life to save me. That takes more courage than any surgery. She paused, her voice softening. I know that feeling of guilt. My father spends billions on research, but he couldn't fix me. I always felt like the one thing his money couldn't buy, and that failure was mine. Daniel nodded slowly, deeply understanding. The truth is, Arya, guilt and responsibility are two sides of the same coin. We both carried the weight of something we couldn't control. I had to let go of the healing to save my own sanity, but I couldn't let go of the humanity. He looked at Nora. Nora taught me that the only thing that matters is showing up, even when you know you can't fix everything. At the exclusive Hartman Clinic wing, every doctor and nurse bowed slightly to Daniel, having been informed of his vital role in precise first aid intervention. His competence spoke for itself. A senior attending physician, Dr. Harrison, approached Daniel quietly in the hallway. Mr. Ross, your handling of Ms. Hartman's stabilization was impeccable. You moved with the authority of an expert. I see you were previously a lead rehabilitation specialist. Your work with kinetic limb mapping was groundbreaking. Daniel offered a small, sad smile. That was a long time ago, doctor. It doesn't matter, Dr. Harrison pressed. Her infection risk is acute. The spinal surgery failed, and the only path forward is the transplant waitlist. But the greatest danger right now is psychological. She's completely shut down. We can manage the cellulitis, but we can't manage her will to fight. She needs someone who understands her pain, not just the pain. Daniel knew he was being offered more than a consultation. He was being offered a chance to re-enter the world of healing on his own terms. Arya, now settled in a sterile hospital bed, looked at him with pleading eyes. Daniel, would you stay just until the pain subsides? Daniel looked at Nora, who was already drawing a picture of a smiling Arya, placing the drawing carefully beside the monitor. Nora whispered firmly, Stay, Daddy. She needs you to teach her how to be brave. Daniel pulled a chair to her bedside. He did more than sit. He remained. He held her hand throughout the initial battery of blood tests and x-rays, his presence a shield against the clinical detachment. Arya whispered, her eyes watery with emotion. No one has ever held my hand during a checkup. For the last 7 surgeries, I was alone, staring at the ceiling. Everyone just looks at the graphs and the numbers. You look at me. Nora climbed onto the bed, placing a small, glittery heart sticker onto Arya's hand, right over the IV line. This is so you remember you're strong, even when the numbers are bad. Arya let out a genuine, light laugh, the first sound of unburdened happiness after months of battling pain and despair. Daniel watched the interaction, the sadness around his eyes softening. He realized that the greatest healing wasn't the surgery. It was this simple, uncalculated connection. He wasn't avoiding failure. He was creating success, one small human act at a time. A few hours later, the chief surgeon entered the room, his face serious. Ms. Hartman is resting comfortably. Her father, Mr. Julian Hartman, has arrived from the main headquarters, and he insists on meeting the man who saved his daughter. Daniel re-embraces his professional destiny out of compassion, while Arya, through Nora's innocence, finds the emotional strength to face her final, desperate battle. The stage is set for the confrontation with the powerful patriarch. Julian Hartman, the most powerful man in the medical technology industry, rushed into the sterile hospital room. He stopped abruptly at the sight. His daughter, the stoic, emotionally distant heiress, was smiling gently, one hand held by Daniel, the other covered in Nora's heart stickers. Tears welled up in the tycoon's eyes. He saw not the failed heiress, but his daughter, alive and emotionally engaged. Arya, I am so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I was too focused on fixing the corporation to fix my own family. He turned to Daniel, performing a deep, respectful bow, a gesture worth billions. You saved my child, sir, not just her body from infection, but her heart and her will to fight. You saw her humanity when we only saw her diagnosis. Daniel shuffled uncomfortably. I just helped someone who needed it, Mr. Hartman. The chairman placed a heavy official file on the bedside table. I want to invite you back into the profession, Mr. Ross. I want to offer you the position of Special Rehabilitation Consultant for the Hartman Pediatric Burn and Post-Surgical Unit. You will have full authority to develop new compassionate care protocols. We will fund all your research. Daniel's hand hovered over the file. He felt the pull of his old life, the joy of competence, the thrill of true purpose. But the terror of loss was still there, a cold knot in his stomach. Mr. Hartman, this is generous beyond measure, but I gave up medicine because I couldn't handle the failure. The pain is too much. I can fix a broken pipe. I can deliver a package. Those things have a clear, predictable ending. Healthcare is never guaranteed. Julian Hartman walked closer, his tycoon authority softening into the plea of a father. That's why I need you, Daniel. You left because you cared too much. My people, the top-tier surgeons, they're brilliant, but they've become numb to loss. They see statistics. You see the human cost. We need you to teach us that humanity again, to create a system where no one is left alone just because the science is complicated. I'm not asking you to take the ultimate responsibility. I'm asking you to bring your compassion back to healing. Julian then glanced at Nora. You can bring her. We have a dedicated private schoolhouse right here on the campus, fully accredited and secure. Your life's work doesn't have to conflict with your family life anymore. We need your values as much as your knowledge. Nora cheered immediately. Do it, Daddy. I like helping people, and I want to help Arya get better. Arya squeezed Daniel's hand, her eyes filled with desperate hope. Daniel, please don't go. I need you, not just to walk, but to find the strength to face the next battle. Daniel looked at the two girls, one his daughter full of simple love, the other the heiress, now utterly dependent on his kindness. He saw his second chance, a chance to heal the wounds of his past by using his skill to save others, and a chance to truly provide for Nora while maintaining his integrity. He signed the contract, A quiet tear escaped his eye, a tear of relief that life had finally yielded something truly good in return for his long suffering. 1 week later, Daniel was gently leading Araya through her first round of hydrotherapy in the rehabilitation pool, Nora splashing happily nearby, cheering them on. Arya looked up at him, her voice small but firm. That day at the restaurant, if you hadn't picked me up, I think I would have let myself fall apart completely. You saved me from being defined by my failures. Daniel smiled gently, his eyes filled with quiet warmth. No one is left behind when they are fighting, Arya. Now stand up. We have work to do. The final scene. Daniel, Nora, and Arya walk out of the clinic wing under the afternoon sun. Daniel guides Arya's wheelchair, Nora walking on the other side, their hands linked. 3 figures moving forward, a new family forged not by blood or wealth, but by a selfless act of kindness in a world that had abandoned them both. The sun catches Nora's glittery heart sticker, the symbol of their unexpected connection, still affixed to the back of Arya's hand. The final shot lingers on their 3 silhouettes, the powerful man and the lonely heiress, now walking side by side toward a future built on compassion. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Single Dad Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.